Well, I just saw like it was look like questions like non-Muslims. I'm not a Muslim. I believe in Jesus
Sure.
Christ. Um,
Okay.
so, um, but I have heard and learned some things about the Quran,
Okay.
and maybe ask a question, see what your thoughts are, see what your mindset of it is. In the Quran, when it talks about the Ida, and there's in Surah chapter 65, ayat 4.
Sure.
It,
Sure.
for what I understand, it gives 3 categories of women to for the divorce period. You're probably familiar with it, and
Yes.
regardless of going into the details, one of the categories, yeah, you probably already know what I'm talking about.
No, I'll tell you why I was smiling and laughing, because the problem is,
What's
like,
that?
it's really sad. Really sad that the Christians generally, or people, when they come, that's the only thing they talk about. Like, this idea of marriage and age of marriage. Like, basically, if you'd be surprised, like, I probably have like probably 5, 6 videos on my channel. By the way, I don't even upload all the conversations on this topic, but I already have like probably 4 or 5 videos on this idea, because of how common it's there. But it's not just you, but literally on every other Muslim channel, you get the same thing. And the reason is, I'm not going to blame you. You seem like a nice guy. I'm not going to necessarily blame you for it. But the problem is, it is common misconception that is pushed by people who hate Islam. So when someone like you, obviously you're not following Islamic material or whatever, so you come across this stuff. That's what you hear all the time. So you're like, okay, let me go and ask about this question. These are all, like, well, I would say, arguments which none of them talk about the foundation of the religion. None of them are foundational questions. Why? Because it's whatever question you're about to ask is called a moral question. It's a question to do with morality. Now, moral questions are tied, all moral questions, whatever the question you're going to come up with to do with morality, it is strictly tied to the fact of your source of morality. Your source of morality is either objective or subjective. Objective is if it comes from God.
I definitely believe in objective morality.
I know. You're a Christian. You're a Christian, so you should believe in objective morality. So I'm saying you have 2 sources of morality. You have objective and subjective morality. So an objective morality for a Muslim would be the revelation that comes from God. An objective morality for a Christian would be the revelation that comes from God. So if now the question will be here. If you want to condemn something else in someone else's morality, then you need to establish first that within your moral framework, that what you're claiming is immoral. Now, I'm going to ask this question, for instance, for you as a Christian. Where does the Bible...
You didn't let me finish my question, though.
But no, I know what your question is. You talked about the Surah Talaq, and you talked about
well, then it also Ibn Kathir also, in the tafsir, his commentary on that surah, from what I've studied, would agree with that the women that have not yet menstruated are prepubescent, according to Ibn Kathir himself. So would you hold to Ibn Kathir's interpretation?
No,
would you just dump that part of Ibn Kathir?
No, whether it's Tabari, Qurtubi, or Ibn Kathir, or any of these classical exegesis scholars, all of them are not authority for us as Muslims. For us as Muslims, what is authority is the following: the Quran, the text of the Quran itself, clear text, and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Then after that, we have something called ijma', which is a consensus of Muslim scholars at a specific age upon a specific issue. And after that, you have qiyas, which is like a form of analogous thing. So these are the sources of revelation for us. These are things which someone can bring and say, okay, here is this. Now, scholars in Islamic history, every single scholar you can name, we can take and reject from them. So in Islam, we have 4 schools of thought. You may have heard about Shafi'i, Maliki, Hanafi. I don't know if you're familiar with these things. I'm not sure how much you're familiar with Islamic scholarship. But in Islam, we have 4 schools of thought when it comes to jurisprudence. Practically all of the heads of these schools of thought said the same thing. They said, if my statement goes against the Quran or Hadith or Ijma', for instance, then throw it away. Imam Malik said, every person you take from them and reject, every scholar, including himself, except the person in this grave, and he pointed at the grave of Prophet Muhammad. The only one we take everything from when it comes to religion is Prophet Muhammad, because he's a messenger of God and he's speaking revelation. So Ibn Kathir can make mistakes. Tabari can make mistakes. And they did make mistakes in their tafsir. Now, this verse of the Quran...
Would you say that? Would you say Ibn Kathir... would you say he made that right there was a mistake based, and that's not what the
It
Quran is
depends on what
saying?
you
Because the
understand.
Quran is depends on how you understand. Because I mean, the Quran, I think
It depends. It depends on how. It depends. I don't necessarily need to disagree with Ibn Kathir's interpretation there. The Quran uses, for example, I'll give you an example. Quran uses the word nisa there in the verse. Okay.
The word, say it again.
Nisa.
Okay.
Nisa. And nisa refers to women who are adults, who reach adulthood. That's not the Arabic words for young girls in the Arabic language. Allah used fatayat, for example, in other places in the Quran, referring to girls which are younger. Or you have the Arabic word jariya for a girl which is young in her age. But the Quran uses
that word.
The Quran uses a specific word that is used for adult women, which is nisa.
So that word you mentioned. Can I ask a question?
That word is mentioned in that verse. That word is mentioned in the verse that you quoted of the Quran.
Yeah. Is that word ever used for a young woman in the Quran, or maybe even in the Hadith?
So the word generally is used for women which are older. Can it be used for women which are younger? It's possible, but it's used generally for women which are older. So if someone wants to say, no, they are used. So I'm talking about the apparent of the word, the apparent of the text. So you have a word that if you use it generally, it refers to women which are adult, but it can also be used in certain cases and circumstances to women which are younger. But if you look at this case, you can look at that verse and you can apply the teaching of the verse to do with menstruation, because there are late menstruation for women which have already reached adulthood. It's a fact, scientific reality that women reach adulthood and they don't menstruate yet. It's a scientific reality. So this verse can apply to that. Okay, this verse can apply to that. But I'm saying I don't even need to take that position. I don't see a problem with Ibn Kathir's position on the issue, personally.
You really?
I don't. Yeah, I don't.
You don't see a problem.
Even though I'm telling you, using the Quran. Yeah, even though I'm telling you.
I know. You may not. I'm not saying you interpret it specifically like that yourself, but you yourself wouldn't even see a problem with Ibn Kathir's interpretation that basically someone could have sex
because people don't understand.
The Iddah period could end for a prepubescent woman. So you
need to understand. You need to understand Ibn Kathir's position before you talk about Ibn Kathir's position, because what people are doing is they take everything in a vacuum. They don't take the whole holistic opinion of Ibn Kathir. So you need to collect all Ibn Kathir's ideas about that marriage first, if you're going to conduct that marriage, and what are you able and you're not able to do. So for example, when these scholars speak, they speak with certain assumptions that exist in Islamic text. For instance, we have something called the harm principle. It's a harm principle, which is one of the main 5 principles in jurisprudence in Islam. And that principle is to do that you're not able to do from the hadith of the Prophet. He says, La dara wa la darar. You're not allowed to cause harm to anyone else or yourself. Okay, you don't cause harm to yourself, you don't cause harm to anyone else. So if any marriage with any woman at any age, if you're going to cause her harm, physical or psychological, and that can be established, then Ibn Kathir and every scholar out there is going to say to you that is haram. So let's first understand this idea. So that's the first thing you need to understand. Secondly, if a girl gets married in a younger age, there is many Islamic teachings about that. First, for instance, is that this marriage can only be conducted by the father. Generally, in Islam, we have someone who's called the wali. A wali will be the guardian of the girl. It doesn't necessarily have to be the father. If the father is not there, it can be someone else. But if the girl is young, the scholars say it has to be the father, specifically the father being the guardian of that specific.
And I'm not necessarily talking about.
Yeah, if you allow me just to finish the answer.
Go ahead. Yeah.
If you allow me. Yeah, thank you. Just so we don't stop in the middle for people, they don't get confused. So the father is the only one who. Yeah, thank you. So the father is the only one who's conducting that marriage. Okay, it's not allowed for anyone else. Of course, the father is going to care about his daughter. Now, someone say maybe there's a bad father. He's not allowed, because in Islam, he needs to show. Now, the second condition has to be for the benefit of the girl. That marriage is going to be conducted for a younger girl. You have to tell us the reason why you're marrying the girl young. They say, for example, this person, I love his character, I love his manners. I want to make sure that he's secured for my daughter, for instance. Another reason the scholars mention, for example, a father is poor. He's unable to provide for his daughter. He's trying to get his daughter married young because he doesn't have financial means to take care of her, for instance. So he would make that marriage contract for the girl to take care of his daughter to someone who's good. So scholars would mention these exceptional cases and scenarios. None of these are recommendations for Muslims to go do. These are commands. In this exceptional case and scenario, what would the Islamic ruling be regarding iddah? Let's not go and marry this or do specifically that. So it has to be the father. It has to be for the benefit of the girl. There can be no harm, physical or psychological, on the girl. And then If these conditions are all applied and valid and there is no issues, we don't have an issue with it. The father is agreeing, the husband is good. If things are done for the benefit of the girl, there's no harm, and it's a marriage, I don't see any issues with it. Where is the immorality there?
I think then there would have to be a specific if you're going to claim, well, based on harm, there has to be a specific ruling of what exactly would be considered harm and what wouldn't be. Like,
sure.
I'm not saying you yourself. Hold on, I'm not saying you yourself hold to Ibn Kathir's position, but and I'm not even trying to get into like arranged marriages. I'm not. That's not really my point. Is getting into arranged marriages, or like, hey, you will marry my daughter, and then maybe there's some type of consummation at a later time. My point is in specific to Surah chapter 65, the iddah is applied to women who have not yet menstruated, which Ibn Kathir does interpret as women. So if that's the case, that means that logically somebody can have sex with a woman because the iddah period would end, and then at point at that the iddah period is, correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm gonna answer you. It's you cannot have intercourse with a woman in outside marriage. You said you're not talking about marriage, but that's the only situation Islamically where you're allowed to do it. This is look, this disease, I'm going to be honest, this disease that starts with the P word exists only in Western societies, because Western societies allow intercourse prior to marriage. In Islam, you're not allowed to have not only intercourse, you're not allowed to touch a woman that is not lawful for you.
But it's like,
touch a woman that is not. If you just allow me 1 second.
What's your name? What's your name? I don't want to talk past one another though, because Muhammed. I don't want to talk past one another though, because I'm not really talking about the age of arranged marriages. In the specific verse, the iddah, correct me if I'm wrong, the iddah has to do with the period of time of sexual relation. That's what the iddah has to do with.
No.
Because the marriage would have already...
Yeah, the iddah is the waiting period. The iddah is the waiting period.
Hold on. Hello?
Sorry, do you mind moving up just a tiny bit so we can get in behind you?
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead. Hold on. The iddah is the waiting period.
Move, then we can talk. It's okay. It's okay. You don't worry. Move a little bit, and then we can talk. Don't worry. Hopefully your connection doesn't cut off though. But move a little bit for people, and then we can continue the conversation.
I think it's okay.
Sure. Okay.
So the iddah period, correct me if I'm wrong, has to do with the waiting period for people that are divorced. So the marriage would have already been taken place.
Yeah. But the iddah itself, what I'm explaining to yes. What I'm explaining to you, the iddah itself is the waiting period until the woman is able to engage in marriage again. Also, the iddah for the first and divorce would be the period where the husband can take the wife back without like a new marriage contract. Basically, he can take her back with telling her I took her back, or by other means the scholars talk about. So I'm explaining what the iddah is. But I already told you, I already explained to you, I don't have an issue with Ibn Kathir's position. Even I don't have an issue with the Ibn Kathir's position. If that, as Ibn Kathir takes it, which is everything I said to you, that the mother, are you still there? Because your
I'm here. I was looking. Well, I wanted to look.
Right. So I said I don't have a problem. Yeah, that's fine.
Sure.
That's fine. So I said I don't have a problem with Ibn Kathir's position, as long as Ibn Kathir's position applied in the way Ibn Kathir takes it, which is that only the father gets to conduct this marriage. It's done for a reason that is beneficial to the girl. It's not the general norm. It's done for a specific reason that is beneficial for the girl. There's no harm happening. You said about the harm, identifying the harm. We have the identification of the harm, by the way. And that identification of the harm is through the people who are specialized in the field. So when it comes to psychology, doctors who are specialized in psychology. Physically, doctors who are specialized in anything to do with the physical body of a person. So if a doctor says, specialized in the field, this is harmful at this time, it's haram for that any relation to take place. If they say it's going to harm the girl psychologically, it's not allowed to take place completely, 100% forbidden. Where do we get that? Allah tells us in the Quran, as the people of knowledge in their specialized fields, if you don't know. No. So if we need to know specifically, now, of course, the father knows his daughter, but for the things which he's not specialized in, he can go to a psychologist, he can go to a person when it comes to the girl. So if we're saying, this is what I'm saying, if a girl now, a marriage is taking place, a marriage, not intercourse before marriage, a marriage is taking place, a holy ceremony, as people refer to it as, in the eyes of God, with the agreement of the father only, who takes care of, who loves his daughter more than you'd ever love any other human being, and that is done for her benefit. He's showing the evidences and reason why this is done for the benefit of the girl. There is no harm, physical or psychological. You have to give me the reason why it's wrong. I mean, if this is the case, which is only Islam is allowed with these conditions. So if someone says to me in this exceptional case, all these conditions apply, you have to give me a reason. Why is this wrong? Why is this immoral?
Well, when it comes to physical or psychological, I feel like even psychological, I think there are certain things people could say, okay, this can cause clear psychological harm, but
if it's the case, then it's not allowed.
I guess.
I mean, I'm saving you the time.
Say it again.
I'm telling you, if you can establish it, I'm telling you, if you can establish harm, then we don't disagree with each other. If anybody can establish
harm, would you say so? Let me ask you, because maybe we're talking past each other. Would you say Ibn Kathir is promoting, his view is that a person can then have sexual relations with a woman? Do you say that's actually not his position?
I just explained to you Ibn Kathir's position. All the conditions I mentioned to you, this is what the position for Ibn Kathir is.
So you would see it as just
Ibn Kathir doesn't speak in a vacuum. Ibn Kathir doesn't Ibn Kathir doesn't speak in a vacuum. Ibn Kathir is talking in a context where, in an exceptional situation, when I said to you, where a marriage is done young, with the agreement with the father for the benefit of the girl, and there's no psychological or physical harm. That is Ibn Kathir's position. So Ibn Kathir is now talking in that exceptional case. Here is the ruling for the Iddah period. Ibn Kathir doesn't talk in a vacuum. He's explaining the ruling in this exceptional case. If that marriage takes place, you should do that. You can open Ibn Kathir's tafsir. None of the scholars say this is what you should do. It's recommended to go and marry this or do that. No, none of them say this. They explain to you the verse, Quranic verse, which has an Islamic ruling in the specific case and situation, exceptional case and situation. If marriage were to take place, what would be the Islamic ruling regarding that? That is Ibn Kathir's position. That's why I said to you, I don't have a problem with Ibn Kathir's position. But it's just understanding Ibn Kathir's position and not being emotional and just like, this feels emotional, so I'm going to disagree with it, you know? Now I was asking you a question, by the way. I was asking you a question about the verse. Now we talked about the verse. I'm going to ask you the question on the verse I was going to ask you about, which is, where does the objective morality that you have, which is Christianity, the Bible, where does it identify that it is incorrect to have intercourse with girls that are young, under prepubescent or whatever? Or where does it give an age of marriage that you're not allowed to marry before or after? Where is that?
It doesn't give a clear age, but it doesn't give a clear number age, but I would say that based on Paul's writings in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, it very well makes clear that that puberty has to happen. Puberty has to happen based on what Paul said. I wouldn't say Paul says it like that, but I would say based on 1 Corinthians 7, puberty has had to take place.
No, where does he say that? What does he say? I have read it.
He mentions the flower of her age. He mentions the flower of her age, which has a...
Okay. What does the verse exactly say? Do you know which verse? Do you know which verse? Because you mentioned a chapter, you didn't mention a verse. What does the verse say? Do you know the number?
Let me go to... it's in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. It's not a long chapter. Let me go to it. If you can still hear me, I can just go to it.
I have it in front of me here.
Okay,
I'm trying to see the exact verse that you're talking about.
So, verse 36.
36. Okay, it is a long chapter then. Okay. All right. If anyone is worried that he might not be acting honorably towards the virgin he is engaged to, if his passions are too strong, he feels he ought to marry, he should do as he wants. He's not sinning. They should get married.
What version? What version are you reading?
I'm reading the NIV, New International Version. Verse 36. If anyone is worried, he may not be able to act honorably towards the virgin he's engaged to. If his passions are too strong and he feels he ought to marry, and he should do as he wants, he's not sinning.
That version, the NIV, I'm not even a big fan of. I'd rather the New King James version.
So now we're talking about the corruption of the Bible, huh? Okay, which version are you talking about?
No, stop. Come on, stop, man. That's...
But no, I'm stopping. I'm reading your book. By the way, I didn't pick the version. I just went on Google on it. Had 1 Corinthians 7, and the first thing that popped up was Bible Gateway, and it was NIV, so I was just reading it. I'm not choosing to read this because
I'm not. The NIV is popular. It is a popular version, but I don't think it's the most.
No, but where is the which version are saying what you're saying? Which versions we can open it up?
The New King James version. That Greek word is hoper akmos, which that has to do with past the bloom, prime of youth. past the flower of her age. So it's making Paul's making a so that actual Greek word, when it says if she is past the flower of her youth, obviously the Bible wasn't originally written in English. That chapter was written in Greek. So that Greek word literally talks about passing her youth. When it says if she is past the flower of her youth, that's what that Greek word means, is literally passing youth.
So what this guy just claimed about the Greek is completely and entirely false. The reason I didn't argue with him too much about the Greek is because whatever translation you want to take, it doesn't really give him a strong argument. So I said I'll argue with him either way for the sake of the argument. But before I go to the Greek, I want to say a more important point actually. This verse that we're reading in Corinthians, Paul himself says 10 verses before that the Creator God gave him no commands at all in regards to this issue of virgins and marriage, and that he's just given his opinion. So this entire verse, I could just simply and very easily dismiss it and say this is just Paul's opinion and it's not even from God. Why do we need to accept Paul's opinion in this issue? But for the sake of the argument anyways, I'm more than happy to talk about the Greek, because the Greek is going to completely destroy his argument. So the Greek word used is hyperakmos. This is the Greek word used in this specific verse. Now, what's interesting is that the majority of the Bible translators translate this verse referring to the man, saying that if his passions are strong. So the reason is actually very simple, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. So now you have someone called Bruce Winter. He has an entire 14-page scholarly article on this issue titled Puberty or Passion. So he has an entire scholarly article just talking about specifically this verse and what does this word mean. So what does he state in this article? First, he states that this verse has long created an unease between biblical commentators. So they had an issue for years about this specific verse and specific wording. Why did they have an issue? So he quotes, for example, commentaries by scholars like Robertson and Plummer on the Bible, where they say that past the flower of her age, this translation is very strong for the word perakmos. So it's not fitting. He also quotes, which is very important and interesting, he quotes this first century Ephesian doctor that says Iperakmos actually means that when the woman is no longer menstruating and can no longer bear children. So that past the flower of her youth, that means she's no longer youthful. So that means that Christian woman, if you want to take this interpretation that this is referring to the woman, and you want to take that Greek rendering and understanding in reference to the woman, that would mean that women, according to Paul, can only marry after the age of 40 or 50 because she's past the flower of her youth. She's no longer menstruating. She is no longer able to bear children. He also quotes G.S. Kissmaker saying that perakmos actually can refer to both men and women. So that verb is actually gender neutral. It can refer to both men and women, and that it refers to the passion of the man. And then he cites BAGD, which is a well-known Greek English lexicon, as proof. Then Bruce Winter goes to tell us that translators are unsure whether this is referring to the man or the woman. Like we said, this is a gender neutral term and it can refer to the man and the woman. He quotes G.C. Hurd, and G.C. Hurd was unable to determine if this refers to the passion of the man or the flower of the woman. And then he says, this is what G.C. Hurd says, that the immediate context actually favors that the word refers to the man, not the woman. And by the way, of course, in the end, Bruce Winter himself, who wrote this entire article, he concludes in the end that this is in reference to the man, and it has nothing to do with the woman or the age of the woman. So to summarize, the Greek word is gender neutral. Majority of scholars, and when we talk about the context, they will say that it favors the man, not the woman. And if you say that this verse is in reference to the woman, that this would mean that she is no longer menstruating and that she no longer can bear children, which means she's past the age of 40 or 50. So you'll be saying that Paul is telling us that women can only get married after the age of 40 or 50. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to say, yeah, can I answer you? Okay. So there's two things there. First, the first thing I'm going to establish and say is that the NIV is up to date of the earlier manuscripts more than the KJV. The KJV relies on manuscripts that comes later on. So the one that relies on earlier manuscripts and is the NIV, is not the KJV. So if the NIV says something, then that would be the more accurate representation of what the earliest manuscripts is actually saying. So if someone else later added flower of... If you allow me, look, you said you to finish. When then I start speaking, you didn't even let me finish the sentence, you know? So let me just, like I allowed you, allow me also to speak, yeah? So that's the first thing I'm going to say. But I'm going to do with you that what I do with every Christian, right? I'm going to be nice. I'm going to be like, no problem. Let's take your understanding, your interpretation. it says something about the flower of her youth. It doesn't change anything. He's talking about a fact. If someone engages with a woman past the flower of her youth or whatever, which is puberty, no problem. He's stating a fact. If someone engages with a girl after, he doesn't say that it's wrong to do it before. Nothing explicit in the text there. So even if I were to take your interpretation, that doesn't prove that he's saying that is before you're not able to do it. If I say, if you get married to a girl that is at the age of 40 and you do this, I'm just stating a reality. I'm not saying to you that you should not you should not get married to a girl that is before.
My point is, like, we don't have to.
Go ahead.
We don't have to. It doesn't have to be an exact word, because that's the thing. Like, exact word fallacies. So when Paul is talking about marrying a virgin woman, he says, if she, I'll read it again, if she is past the flower of her youth. So when Paul says that, clearly he's laying down a command. If you want to marry her, she has to be past the flower of her youth. When Paul is talking about marrying a virgin woman, he says, if she, I'll read it again, if she is past the flower of her youth. So when Paul says that, clearly he's laying down a command. If you want to marry her, she has to be past the flower of her youth. If she, why would he even say that? It's like if I said to you, Muhammad, get married to a woman, if she is past the flower of her youth, Muhammad, right? If I said that to you, I'm laying down a stipulation.
He's not saying get married to a woman.
I'm just giving an example of when
you're equivocating.
Somebody gives a stipulation.
How is that an equivocation? It's not the same thing. Because you are given an example which doesn't apply to the current situation. The verse doesn't say what you're saying. But I said to you, I don't care. Pick whichever translation you like. Even if I take your convenient translation that you try to say so it can fit your narrative, which already, like I said, great, because it shows us how the Bible is corrupt. We have some things in some versions and some things in other versions, relying on different manuscripts because they all disagree with each other. So even if I take your version and your understanding, there is nothing there that says that you are not allowed, or it is immoral for you to do that specific action. I already told you that you can go, and we have clear examples where it tells you of girls which are little young girls, you're able to have relations with them, and in the Old Testament. So if this is the reality in the Old Testament, and the Old Testament already teaches you to do that, then even if what you're saying is true, then you'll have to explain how it was allowed in the Old Testament, even if, which is not true. Anyways, you're saying you haven't showed any verse that says that. And Paul is not an authority. Anyways, that's a different story that we can get to in a different time. But there is nothing that you explicitly showed me. Yeah, there's nothing that you've explicitly showed me from Jesus or from God, literal words of God in the Old Testament or the New Testament, where it says that if a girl is before puberty or whatever, that you're not allowed to have specific relations with them. Now, unless you're able to show that, then we can talk about it. If you're not able to show that, you just say, I don't have a verse that explicitly says that. But it's implied from this. I imply it from this specific translation of this specific version of the Bible. I'll be like, okay, no problem. Take all the implying you want, but you cannot establish the reality clear in the text. And you also, like I said, cannot deal with the reality that already in the Old Testament. I'm finishing. Last thing I'm saying. You have to cope with the reality that already in the Old Testament.
We can talk about Muhammad. We can talk about the Old Testament.
Even if I were to accept, which you don't have that argument anyways. Even if I were to accept, it is saying that in the New Testament, which isn't. You will have a problem there. You have a contradiction because there is a different morality given in the Old Testament. Either you say that morality changed there, or you say there is a clear contradiction between the texts. So does the Old Testament give commands in war to take female captives, little children, for men to take them, the women that haven't slept with the men to take them as female little children, to take them as female captives to the soldiers? Does the Bible command you to do that or not?
It says they could take them, but it doesn't mention specifically what they could do with them in that verse.
Does the Bible in other places, when it talks about female captives, say that you're allowed to have intercourse with them?
It talks about, from what I know, it talks about marriage and it talks about certain things, but
no, does it say you're allowed to have intercourse? Okay, marriage, no problem. Let's take marriage. Does it say you can have intercourse with them?
You'd have to look at the specific place, and then so the specific place you're talking about. Hold on, Muhammad. The specific place you're talking about in Numbers mentions that they could, the people could take the women, but it doesn't mention exactly what they could specifically do with them at that period of time. Could at some point they be married? Yeah, but it doesn't say when. It doesn't say oh, you can take them now and have sex with them now. It doesn't say that.
Okay, I'm going to
So
read the Bible now.
women do get older, and women do grow, and at some point,
Sure.
they could get married.
Okay, so I'm gonna read the Bible. First, Numbers chapter
Go ahead.
31, verse 17 says, "And therefore kill every male among the little ones, and keep every female among the little ones who have not known a man by laying with him for yourself." So keep for yourself all the little girls. The word there is for prepubescent girls in Hebrew. Anyone can go and check it when it says little ones. So it's talking
I
about
don't
taking
disagree.
girls.
I don't disagree.
Sure. Cool. Sure. So we agree now that it's a take the prepubescent girls. Then we go to Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 10. What does it say? It says, when you go to war against your enemies and you Lord delivers them in your hands and you take captives. So like the situation we're just reading. If you notice among the captives a beautiful woman, you're attracted to her. You may take her as your wife. Bring her to your home, shave her head, trim her nails, and put aside her clothes that she was wearing when she was captives. And then when she mourned her father and her mother for a full month, you may go to her and she shall be your wife. If you're not pleased with her, let her go wherever she wishes. You shall not sell her or treat her as a slave, since you have dishonored her. So you take the woman, this little girl, is prepubescent as your wife. Take her to your house, you change her clothes, you cut her nails, you cut her hair. You do obviously what you do with your wife with her. So the Bible here is giving us an explicit command, a clear command that you're able to go and take these female captives, in this case, prepubescent girls that have not known a man by laying with him, explicit that you can go and have intercourse with them as your wife. So if the Bible is teaching you to do that, then on what grounds do you have Christians coming to us and complaining to us about what Islam says regarding this issue?
Well, you're making a presupposition. It seems like that Numbers is giving the explicit okay that at that point in that specific time, those women could be, the men could have sexual intercourse with those young women. That's the presupposition you're making based on that question you're asking me. So of course you can go to laws when it talks about women that are taken captive and talk about what are to be done with them. But when it's mentioning these young women, which obviously the Bible does give us distinction that they are young, and that they have not known a man. I don't disagree.
I did find the right word. I didn't find the right word. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, but
sure.
The point is, it doesn't tell. It doesn't. Hold on. It doesn't tell. It doesn't say exactly what in that moment they are to do. So the point, like, there could be children that could grow up in a specific house and be now clinged on to Israel as foreigners, right? Because there are other laws that talk about people clinging, like, not along the lines clinging into the house of Israel. So there can be foreigners that come among them and that grew up within their land, and it is what it is. But it doesn't say specifically, like, you're making the assumption that is applying to these young little women, which it doesn't say that is right there applying to these young little women. It's just a law about being with women that are women that are captive, or women that become their wife. It doesn't necessarily say specific there in Deuteronomy, but in Numbers it's a specific women they're taking in, and it never mentions exactly what in that moment they're to do. It doesn't say, at this point you're to do this, or this point you're to do this. It's just a description of certain women that are taken captive in that period of time. So, like you're making the presupposition, it seems like that's what happened. It doesn't say that. So does that make sense?
Okay, sure. And now I'm gonna answer you, and then I can stop here. I'm gonna say this is clear for everyone, like how that's why what I was saying before about the coping. I mean, everyone sees what's happening here when he's speaking. That's why I allowed him to speak, because when he speaks, it's volumes. That's all I'm gonna say. How he's trying to change the reality there. And also, what is really so funny is, like, it doesn't say it there. 2 minutes ago, he was trying to argue for an exact word fallacy. It doesn't say an exact word fallacy. And then when we go to the verse, which explicitly says something, now he makes the argument, oh no, it's not the exact word fallacy. You see, this is why I say my issue usually when you argue with Christians, because they're not consistent rationally. When you approach them with something is clear and true, they're trying to use the fallacy in this case. because it's clear and true. Why? It's a very simple thing. He already admitted and agrees to this. The verse talks about little children, prepubescent girls that you can take as female captives for yourself. Now he says, what are you going to do with them? Oh, they're going to, give them some juice and put them next to the road somewhere. Go sit over here, So obviously you're going to take female captives and they're going to be like, okay, go play there in the field a little bit. So of course you're going to take, we all know what happens to female captives. So it says take little prepubescent girls as female captives. Then the Bible tells you what to do with female captives. It tells you to take them, change their clothes, do all of these things with them, take them as you wife, have intercourse with them. So we have this clear command of God, explicit, clear. For you to have intercourse with captives, we have clear command that you take these prepubescent girls as captives. Therefore, the issue is clear and done. And this is the only reason I went into this. Like I said, that's the whole reason. Look, I don't even need to go to these arguments. I can clearly bring them easily. Can make these arguments against Christianity, what you do with captives, beating them half dead, and the next day, if they don't die, nothing happens to you. I can make this argument easily. The difference is that Muslims go to the core. We show how your Bible is changed, corrupted, doesn't have earlier manuscripts like you were showing now by all of these different translations. We go to the core. You guys come with these arguments, and you still get refuted on the arguments that you think you have something against Islam. It's like these side issues, you still get refuted on from your own book and your own scripture. Anyways, we've exhausted this issue way too much. I'm sorry. Let me finish my statement.
Can I respond after you?
I didn't interrupt you, David. I didn't interrupt you. So I've allowed you to talk. If you speak, you're going to say something and I'm going to have to respond to it. And then we're going to spend another 2 hours speaking. You had your chance. I let you speak. I didn't interrupt you. You said everything you needed to say. I said everything you needed to say. If you speak, I'll have to answer. And if I answer, I know you'll have to answer again. So we're not going to go in this back and forth forever.
Well, you can respond.
We've
respond. I want to make the point. I just want to make the point that.
So thank you for coming, David. And like I said, we're not going to keep going back and forth. I mean, I'm going to let you speak, then I'm going to respond. Did you say I'm going to speak? Then we're going to be here until 5 o'clock in the morning doing the same thing. Already exhausted this issue. So it's time for you to go.